Hi, and welcome to the second part of the personality lecture from chapter 15. This is going to be picking up right after we talked about defense mechanisms and Freud's ideas of personality. One of the things that's important to remember about Freud is that he believed that these personality that we have, that iceberg format of personality, the id, the ego, the superego. He says we develop this level of the unconscious that we have. We develop this through the fact that we go through these different developmental stages in our life. And you'll remember that his stages are psychosexual developmental stages. Those 5 stages being the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital periods. And of course, you'll remember fondly about the idea that if we become fixated in a particular stage, that fixation, that conflict that we're unable to resolve, is going to cause us to either manifest behavior in a certain way, or it's going to influence our personality. So you'll remember the oral stage being 0 to 2-ish. If somebody becomes fixated in that stage, maybe their personality is going to evolve into someone who's talkative or a smoker. Maybe someone who has a biting, get it, biting sarcasm. Somebody who would overeat or excessively drink. Those who are in the anal stage, again, this is potty training time, so 2 to 4-ish time, is going to be someone who's going to be stingy, maybe stubborn, someone who's overly obsessed with orderliness, cleanliness, everything has to be a certain way. Or perhaps the converse, the reaction formation to that, the very messy person could have a fixation in the anal stage. Someone who is stuck in the phallic stage may have a problem with authority or aggression. They could have a sexual identity issue, because you'll remember this is when the person identifies with the member of the parent of the opposite sex. So this is when the little boys are attracted to moms and girls attracted to dads, and they want to replace their same-sex parent in the eyes of the favor of that other parent. This can lead to sometimes abnormal sexual behavior if there's a fixation there later in life. The latency period was when they identify with their same-sex parent. They start to get their own gender identity there, and a fixation here can lead to same-sex friendship issues or gender identity issues sometimes. And the genital phase is going to be when puberty hits, and that's going to lead to a fixation there might lead to sexual intimacy issues. Now, people study with Freud, and they come along a little bit later. We call those people neo-Freudians, and for the most part, these neo-Freudians create the psychodynamic perspective or psychodynamic theory, which is a variation on what Freud says in the psychoanalytic perspective. And Carl Jung is kind of the biggest of the psychodynamic theorists. He was Freud's boy. He and Freud worked together. They got along very well. They were kind of hand in hand in what they were trying to accomplish in the way that they viewed things. But over time, Jung started to think that Freud emphasized sex way too much. And he said he did not, while he was completely on board with the idea of the unconscious being the primary thing that creates our personality or dictates our personality, he said sex wasn't as involved as Freud really focused on. Jung did say that, and in fact, by the time they ended their careers and their lives, neither of them were talking to each other or wouldn't mention each other of them in conversation. So Jung does say that there are 3 parts of the unconscious mind. He says we have a personal unconscious, which is going to be what your own experiences are based upon your repressed thoughts, undeveloped ideas, things that are personal to you. Still unconscious, you can't access them, but it's personal to you. But he says we also have a collective unconscious, and these are going to be any kind of behavior pattern or an ingrained memory that we inherit from our ancestors. And for the most part, we're going to have that consistently across our different, even different cultures, okay? This is going to be, he says, an explanation for deja vu. The reason that we think that we've been there somewhere before is that deep down within our unconscious, maybe one of our ancestors has a memory of something similar to that scenario or situation, and we interpret that as deja vu. He also says we have an ego, our level of consciousness. So we have personal and collective unconscious, and then we have our own ego. But in that collective unconscious, one of the most important things that he comes up with is the idea of archetypes. And that is, he says, responsible for the fact that a lot of times you'll see creation stories or other mythical type stories, and those stories will have consistent character ideas or consistent situations or consistent morals or things like that, that even though these cultures didn't have contact with each other, these things kind of developed the same way over time. He says that's because we have these archetypes, these ideas inborn in us that come from our ancestors. So we have an idea of the animus, male traits, the anima, female traits, that kind of is this idea of what masculinity and femininity is that we're inheriting from our ancestors. And he says this can help us recognize ourselves in others and also relate to other people with empathy. And also, as far as personality goes, he characterized people in either extroverts or introverts, someone who's outgoing or a little less so, or people who are rational or irrational, clear thinking or not clear thinking. So if you pause this, you can access on Blackboard the Jung's Archetypes document, and there's an extra credit assignment that you may want to do, you can choose to do, if you'd like to, associated with Jung's Archetypes, wherein you would create or write a story utilizing some of those. So go ahead and pause me now if you like. And welcome back. The next psychodynamic theorist we have to talk about is Alfred Adler. And Adler develops what he calls the inferiority complex, which is a focus on things that you seem to be your own shortcomings, your own inadequacies. And by focusing on this so much to the exclusion of everything else, that's going to become the focus of your personality. He says Freud focuses too much on not just sex but physical pleasure. He says most of us have this unconscious need to strive for being the best, or at least the best that we can be. We want to be superior, not just our own best, but better than other people. We want to be superior. And he also looks at birth order and how important birth order is in the development of personality. So you can access Blackboard and you can take now, if you haven't looked at the article on birth order or taken a look at the chart on Adler and birth order, what he says the character traits are associated with each place in the family, you can do so now. And welcome back. Next we'll move on to Erik Erikson. Remember, he did the psychosocial stages of development, saying that there are 8 different crises that occur within our lives at those different stages, which the resolution of those crises are important to how we're going to not only behave, but our development of our personality along the way. So things like identity versus role confusion or generativity versus stagnation. So you'll want to make sure that you review those very well so that you identify and can see how those 8 different stages could cause a personality crisis in each eventuality. Karen Horney comes along and she says that Freud, of course, does place too much emphasis on both sex and physical pleasure. She says instead of thinking about sex so much, she focuses on anxiety. She says the levels of anxiety that we have can become neurotic trends. So if we use these defense mechanisms that Freud identified and we use them too much, they can become these all-consuming insecurities that we have that can kind of control our behavior. And she says there are 3 kinds of neurotic trends, or I should say there are 3 types of personality associated with neurotic trends. First, we have the people who move towards other people, the compliant type. And those are people that will submit to other people in order to always go along with and gain the approval of those around them. This is going to be the person that, where do you want to go for dinner? Well, I don't care, where do you want to go for dinner? Rarely having an opinion, but always kind of wanting to be the people pleaser of the bunch. She says we also have those that move against other people, the aggressive type. And these are people that are going to be contrary. They're going to, instead of wanting to go along with other people, they're going to challenge everything that other people say. So where do you want to go for dinner? Oh, well, the place you want to go is an awful place. That's a horrible choice. I think we should go here, as opposed to going along with or trying to make everything run smoothly. She says then we have the moving away from type of person, the detached type. And this is going to be somebody who doesn't want to go to dinner at all, doesn't really want to interact with other people, to move away from other people. And she says this can be a problem because when you react in this way inflexibly, constantly, this can trap you. It can be kind of the dominating feature of your personality and can keep you from becoming who you should be. Nancy Chodorow identifies or really looks at gender and says, how is it that our identification with a gender, our attachment to a particular gender, helps develop our personality? So she looks at how boys connect to mom, who's usually the primary caregiver, while girls connect to mom in a different way. When we think about what separates us from our primary caregiver. Usually that is growing up and moving on with your life. In a lot of ways, you think about that as being kind of marriage. Boys, when they get married, are abruptly replacing their mother with their wife, not kind of in a weird, creepy way, but the person that is the primary female, I guess, influence in their life goes from being mom to being their wife or their significant other. And this is a very dramatic break, says Chateauroux. Girls, though, don't really ever replace mom. Because their husband doesn't replace mom, they're able to just kind of grow and move away from mom in a more organic way, a more natural way. And Chateauroux says that this can cause a problem in young men when they're abruptly taken away from that relationship with their mom, and then sometimes they try to make their wife into their mom, where they make their wife pick up after them or treat them in the same way as they would their mother. So that's what her focus was. Now, if we're going to assess the unconscious, we use projective tests, things like the thematic apperception test, or the TAT test, where you will be given a picture, and then a person would be asked, okay, describe for me the story of what's happening in this picture. So it's projective in nature, that the person is able to project their own feelings and interpretations onto something that's ambiguous. Same with the Rorschach inkblot test. It's a series of 10 inkblot plates that are reviewed and then analyzed or interpreted by a psychologist. So that is a projective test as opposed to an objective test, which would be something like, here's a question, yes or no, A or B, A, B, or C, multiple choice, things like that. Okay, so if you want to access, there's a fun little inkblot activity that you can do on Blackboard if you want to take time to do that now. It's not the actual Rorschach inkblot test, but it is one that would be similar, and a fun little interpretation for it. Okay, at this point, that's going to end the portion of the second day of the Chapter 15 lecture. So if you have any questions, please make sure you let me know, and I'll see you on test day.